Okay, I will start the recording. So, hello everyone. I would like to welcome everyone in our 7th webinar for this month, Coding for Moodle. After the first webinar and Gareth's webinar, I received a lot of requests for that. We are honored to have a colleague of mine, Peter Welch, from the University of Nottingham in Ningbo, China. He's in Vietnam right now. We wish him well and safe return to China at some point. We miss him here on campus. We really miss you. I would like to welcome him. Don't forget to take your certificate of attendance from the chat box. Also, I would like to make a few announcements. Please answer our polling questions. You get to decide when our first online conference is going to take place. Also, next week, we have our Secretary Craig Colson and Dr. Lawrence from Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. They're going to talk about teaching writing, creating an online writing environment. The first week of June, we're going to have our final webinar, and then we're going to stop for the summer and prepare for our online conference in October. Exciting things are coming. If you want to contribute to our blog, you're welcome. You are more than welcome. So I would like to welcome Peter, and please enjoy this webinar.
Okay, so today...
I don't know whether...
Who is that person?
Okay, so today I'm going to attempt to introduce 3 types of code which are commonly used on Moodle pages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'll explain how each one works and what some of the limitations are for them on Moodle. And also I'll try and touch on what are called responsive pages or responsive content, where no matter what size monitor or screen you're using, it still works properly on the screen. I'll start off with showing you a couple of Moodle pages I've made which use code to quite an extensive effect. And then in the second part of the session, I'll demonstrate using some code on Moodle. So we'll look at some common styling features like colors, sizes, borders, columns, also look at some tables, divs, and a div is just a box basically, and iframes, which are a way of having content from elsewhere on the internet or anything with a URL on a Moodle page. Also look at a few things that can be done with images, and look at a little bit of JavaScript, not a great deal because it's quite complicated and quite time consuming. But we will look at one way you can hide and unhide content at the click of a button, which uses a little bit of JavaScript. So before I start, there's a word of warning about code. You must be very precise. What looks like punctuation in a piece of code isn't. It's part of the code. And if anything is missed out or added in the wrong place, the code probably won't work. So just as an example of that, I'll show you an example in a little while, where if you write code on a Word document and, for example, use quote marks, the quote marks on a Word document are not the same as quote marks in code. They're very subtly different, and it causes the code not to work. But I'll show you that later. Okay, so there are 3 types of code: HTML, which is hypertext markup language, and as an analogy, that's like the nouns. So it's all the content that you have. So all of the content on Moodle is written in HTML. So we're not going to look at using that a lot, a little bit just to show you what it is. But it's basically already there. Whenever you add something to Moodle, it's written in HTML. Unless you are the Moodle administrator for wherever you are. The default, like the font, the colors, those sorts of things can't be easily changed. It's up to the administrator what font they use, what colors they use. Almost always there is a beginning and an end of a piece of HTML code. So it has a tag at the beginning. So it has sharp brackets. I'll show you those in a minute. And that tells the browser where the code starts and where it ends. CSS, which is the way of making style, changing what things look like, that's like the adjectives. So any HTML code, and therefore any content, can be styled using CSS, cascading style sheets. There's a lot of CSS, and it's written by an organization, a worldwide organization. They keep adding to it, so there are lots and lots of things every year, new things which come up. So there are examples like colors, fonts, different size, how things are arranged on the page, all sorts of things. Third one is JavaScript, and that's like the verbs. JavaScript makes things happen, so these are the actions. So some examples are making something appear or disappear on the click of a button, making things change color on click. You can have timers, all sorts of things. JavaScript, however, may or may not work, or a particular piece of JavaScript may or may not work in Moodle, depending on the version of JavaScript that has been installed in your version of Moodle. So I've found that some things which work elsewhere, where I do a lot of other work, they work fine, but then when I try and replicate the same thing in Moodle, it won't work. But and it's all dependent on your version of Moodle and what your administrators have done. Okay, so those are the three things, three main codes. There are other codes you could use, but these are the main ones that are used. These are also the main three codes of making any websites on the internet. So most website makers, where you make it, have a separate editing window or areas for CSS and JavaScript. Or they have it so that you can add to the top or the head of a web page. In Moodle, we can't do, well, my version of Moodle anyway, we can't do that. So you can't have a head part, which is a normal way of adding that sort of code. So what I do is add the CSS to the HTML, which is a practice frowned upon by website builders, but it works perfectly well. The only thing is, often you have to duplicate things, replicate it over and over again, instead of being able to do it once, have a way of having it work in lots of different instances on a page. But even so, it's not terribly difficult. JavaScript can be added to the bottom of a web page, not the top, just by adding script language equals JavaScript. And then it tells the Moodle page, this is a piece of JavaScript. So we put the JavaScript at the bottom, and then we link to it from in the HTML. Okay. So what I'd like to do is share my screen. So what I've got here is, you can see a Moodle page. This is called Sealy Gold. This is a thing for students, lots of different activities for students. It's irrelevant what the content is. I just wanted to show you what a page can look like. So this is a Moodle page, but I've done everything on here has been styled using pieces of code. So it's got lots of boxes. The idea is to make it attractive for students because it's not a compulsory thing. The students voluntarily come here. And then included in here also are some tricky bits of code, JavaScript, which make it do that. So I can click a button at the top and it goes to a particular part of the page and opens the page. The same here, it does. This is an example of what I said. Click something and it makes something appear, and click it again and it disappears. So that, click something and it appears. And then that. So just wanted to show people what is possible. Of course, you're using your imagination with code. It's just a designing tool, really. Another page is this one. This is for reading and vocabulary and grammar evaluation of our students. Again, it's not a compulsory thing for the students, so I need to make it reasonably attractive and also easy to use, which was the main idea of this page. One thing I find difficult in Moodle is getting pages to do this, so that it has a grid layout. I could do it in a table, but I find that tables, when they're on different size monitors, don't work the same. And often you'll end up with either text that you can't read, or it's all squashed into one place. So what I've done here is, this is not a table, it's just a one line of code, and I'll show you that in a minute. And again, this does the same, just click something in it, hopefully. Open something. So again, it's just imagination, trying to make it attractive and easy for these students to use. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is to make a few things in Moodle. Now, if anyone's got any questions as I go along, please do ask. I just need to change this. Just a moment. Are you seeing my whole screen or just? I can't see what you're seeing. Can somebody tell me whether you can see a Word document?
I can see a whole screen.
We can see two. We can see two parallel things, or two.
Yeah, that's right. So on the left-hand side, or there's a Word document, and it's got some bits of code on it. And what I want to do is then demonstrate what happens with them in this Moodle page. So on Moodle, on a label or a page or elsewhere on Moodle, the common things to have are text, images, tables, and hyperlinks. Of course, you can have many other things, but these are very common things. And so in Moodle, a piece of text usually has a tag P, which stands for paragraph, surrounding it. So that there. So it just says P, meaning paragraph. Then you can have many paragraphs and they go down the page, or you can break up a paragraph with BR, standing for break. And this is the same as using Shift Enter on your keyboard. So instead of having the large gap between paragraphs, it's still within the same paragraph. The next thing is an image. When you put an image into Moodle, it creates a URL. So every image has a unique URL. Now, what we have here is what it looks like in the code. So we just have IMG, which stands for image, SRC, I've forgotten what that means, equals your image URL. And then you've got the option of doing a little bit of styling of the image. So here I've got it at width 75%. So it takes up 75% of the width, yeah?
Can I ask a brief question? You've got, or at least you appear to have, gaps between commands img, and then it appears to be a gap between img and src. Is that okay? You can put in gaps just for ease of reading.
In that case, it has to have a gap because img says image, and then src is saying this is the URL. Elsewhere, you'll see some styling where sometimes I've got it with a gap and sometimes there isn't a gap. There is a gap and it doesn't matter. You can't, however, I'll show you that in a minute and I'll point it out.
Put a gap just before width, between the inverted commas and width. That's great, is it? It's no problem.
Yeah, that should be there. It needs a gap.
Okay,
so sometimes you have to have a gap.
Okay.
Sometimes you may have a gap or you don't, it doesn't matter. You can never have two gaps. It can only be one. Once you have two, it breaks the code, or almost always. The thing about code is there's always an almost always, because there's always an instance where it will work. Okay, so normally when you put in a picture, an image into Moodle, it gives both a height and a width, usually in pixels, px. That sets it on the page at that particular size. That means if you change the screen size, the picture doesn't change size. So if you've got go down to a phone, for example, usually the picture won't be viewable because it'll be too large for the screen. So what you can do is just change it to a percentage, 100%, 75%, 50%, whatever you like. And then that's the width. And then height is auto. It's auto because in almost every case, there's only one or two things where it does work. The height just follows the width. I could set it as a particular height, like I could make it 500 pixels, but then depending on the screen size, the height would stay the same and the width would change, which would distort the picture. So you just have it as a percentage and auto. So that creates a responsive image. If you go to a different size monitor, it's going to change size. Looks very good. The next one is a URL. So pretty simple. The only thing that changes really is this target. So A is the tag for URLs. Href is your URL address. Then the target underscore blank means open in a new tab. Why it doesn't say new tab, I don't know. So you can have it in a new tab or a new window or open on the same page. If you take away the target, it'll just open on the same page and replace that content. An email address is very similar, and it has mail to, and then your email. And then some sort of tag, some sort of writing for someone to click. The A makes it look alive. It makes it into the hyperlink or a clickable link. Okay. This is a table. I'm going to just demonstrate these quickly. A couple of them anyway. So in our version of Moodle, as you can see over here, and I'm not sure if everyone's is the same, but we have the option of using code, which is great. I use this toggle full screen a lot because it gives me more room to work. So we've got a little button there which increases the size of the working window. Then into the HTML or the code area. So at the moment, by default, it's just got a paragraph with no content. I'm just going to put in this email address by deleting that, what's there, and there. And then I've just got a email address, which won't send to anyone because there's no one called Joe Blogs. And there's my email, click that, and then I'll be into an email. Very useful. Next thing is a table. I find tables in Moodle are by default fairly frustrating, but still useful. I say that because in our version of Moodle, it doesn't create a nice simple table, which is just the body with some cells in it. It creates a couple of layers at the top. It adds extra code that I don't want in my tables. But that's all a table is, basically. So you've got table, T-body, make it bigger. T-body, that's the body, and then we've got TR, which is the row, and TD, which is the column. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, presumably, I'm interested in how you actually go about writing a table. Presumably, you write a table, let's say, in Word, so you know what is in each cell. You don't compose, surely you don't compose the table straight into code, do you?
No, it's giving you a demonstration of what it looks like. The thing is, though, if I make a table in Moodle, I'll show you what it looks like. And this is our one anyway. So I've got three columns, 3 rows. Now that's created a table, but it's also added extra stuff. So that's my table above. And now I've got a head, a caption, a head, TH instead of TD. So it's added all this extra stuff in here, which I don't want it. So all I would do is delete it. And then I've got a table. So then I can either add my content here, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've made a very simple table. I can add content here. The thing I find though is often I want to copy and paste material into a table from a Word document or from somewhere else. If you copy and paste directly from a Word document, it tends to pick up extra bits of code. In that case, it didn't, but it doesn't have to. Sometimes it does. So it'll pick up extra code, which is what has happened to that piece of text on a Word document. It did pick up a little bit in that I've got an I, which is italics. Yeah. Another thing that we can do is, of course, add color or text size or something like that. And all we're doing is going in. On our version of Moodle, we have 6 colors, which I think is very, very limited. Maybe on your version, you've got lots and lots of colors. So for me, I end up having to find colors on a website somewhere and then adding them to it. But I can demonstrate what happens. So I've made it red. Then I look in here and I've got an RGB color. Let's quickly do that. There are two main types of color code used in websites or on Moodle. One of them is called RGB and the other one is called HEX. I find HEX much easier because it's a much simpler code. So RGB, then I've got 3 numbers. Now that's by default. Now if I wanted to produce the same thing, which is red, I can do it with a hex, which is just a hashtag and then some letters and numbers. And then it's still red. I find hashtags much easier. Most of the world, web development world uses hex numbers. The only time I use RGB is if I want to have transparency, because it's a very easy way of doing it. So if I want a slightly transparent color, I can add that. And there I've got RGBA, and the A stands for something, but it means transparency. And then I've got 3 numbers, which are the RGB, red, green, blue, and then the A, and I've got something between 0 and 1, which sets the degree of transparency. You can do that with anything with a color by using RGB. And we'll come back to colors in a couple of minutes. Okay, I just want to show you a couple of other things. When you add color or text size, something like that, there are 2 ways to do it. One is within a span. So a span just means, like it sounds, a span of text or a span of content. I could have put, don't need class. I could have put the style directly in the P. So I could just say P space style equals color. That does exactly the same. Same with text size. But if you wanted one piece of your content to be red and one piece to be black, you put the red piece inside a span, and then that creates a small distinct area of color. Oops. So there I've got my span. It's an unnecessary class. And the span finishes, so it's got a beginning and an end, and then it tells it what it is in the middle. And I've got red and black. Okay. One thing that I use a lot is a thing called a div. Now divs basically are boxes. You can't automatically create a div in Moodle. You have to write it. So if you want to use divs, you need to write div, and then you can add whatever style you want to the div. And to add, this is the CSS, to add style, it's just style equals quote marks and then whatever it is that we're going to put in. So let's say I wanted a box with a border, so a black border around it. I need to write border, and then I need to tell it what type of border. So in this case, here's an example of where I could have a space or I don't need a space. Either is fine. Now I want a 1 pixel, so a very thin border. I want it to be solid, and I want it to be dark blue. I'm not sure if that'll work, but we'll try. Now, I'm going to add what I had before, that the 2 words content, and that's my content. So I've got a div to start, and then I need to end with a slash mark and div again. And it didn't like that. Code. So I put in a color code. There are hundreds of websites where you can find colors. Just look up on the internet. So now I've made that box there, which has those 2 words content in it. course, I can make the box as big as I like. I can add in pictures. I can put in anything I like. I can put in a background color by just in here writing background color. CSS, or most code uses American spelling. So color is C-O-L-O-R. And we'll put in a light yellow. And so now I've got a box with a black border, a thin black border, and it's a light yellow color. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a moment. How are we doing for time? Oh, flying fast. Another very useful thing is a thing called an iframe. Iframes give you the ability to add content from elsewhere on the internet. So anything with a URL can be added into an iframe. So to make an iframe, we just have to write iframe src, which is telling it it's a URL, equals quote marks the URL that you want to use, and then we need a width and a height. This is the same as a picture. It can be a set size, so it could be 600 by 400 or whatever you like, or we can make it 100%, so it changes according to the size of the monitor that's being looked at. Okay, so I'm going to get that URL. Oops. So now I add in a URL. I can add in a URL for another Moodle page, or if I have a PDF. So if I go to put a PDF onto a Moodle page and I want to display it on the page, I don't want to have someone to click anything. I want it to be sitting on the page. That's what an iframe will do. So there's the page that I had before, which has a large, just ignore the notice. So now what I've done is, I need to save it first. So I've got a page, or I've got a label, which has got a yellow box at the top, and then I've added a website. So in this case, another Moodle page. A couple of other things that you can do, easy styling to make things look nice, are these. So border radius. If you want to have curved corners, so now I've got, instead of sharp corners, I've got nice curved corners. I just increased the size of the border so that I have a much fatter line. Then, but the problem is we can see up in the corner here, the content is very, very close to the edge of the div, of the box. And the way to fix that is to use a thing called padding. So I write the word padding and then I give it a size. 10px. So now I've got more space here and it looks nicer. So CSS is all about making things look nice. Now, at the moment, this displays right across the page, even though there's no content telling it to go across the page. So by default, divs fill the available space. So no matter how big, it's responsive and it changes size according to the size of the monitor. So on a phone, that's going to look fine. On a very large screen, it'll also look fine. Now, we may, however, want more than one div. So now I just made another one by copying it and changing the background color. But let's go to the next bit. Yes. But maybe I want it to have as columns on the page so that the two divs are next to each other, not underneath each other. Like I showed you on that page before. This one, where I've got different, these are divs, but I've set them up so they're next to each other. There's two ways of doing it, well, three ways. You could put them inside a table, but that's not a very good way of doing it because you got the problems with the table. The other two ways are to create columns and to use a thing called flex. And flex is a way of making something automatically, depending on the size of it, fill a space in multiple columns. First, this. So what I do is have another div, because divs, they're really just a way of organizing a screen. So I've organized it so I've got two filled with background color so you can see them very easily. But you can easily have a div with nothing to make it obvious. So in this case, I'm going to make a div display flex. So I've got this piece of code here. Now display is just telling it what do you want it to do. So there are a number of different display things. And they're often to do with positioning of something on a Moodle, on a Moodle page or a website. In order to go into that, we would need several more hours because positioning is quite complicated and there's a lot of different things to it. There are some very good websites for looking at specifically that, and I'll show you one in a minute. So now I've made it so those two divs, which were before spread across the page horizontally, are now next to each other, except that I think they're too close. So I'll just do one more piece of code, which was this one. So instead of, I did a padding to make the space, the area, make a space between the content and the edge of the div. Now I want to do something between the divs to make it sit on the page a bit nicer. And all I need there is a thing called a margin. I can do it like this. And all I'm doing is still just adding into the style. So you can just add, keep on adding. What you have to do each time you go to a different element is put a semicolon. So it's border, colon, and then what type of border, and then a semicolon. Then it's a new thing. Background color, semicolon, border radius. It could be the color of the text, all sorts of things. Each time add a semicolon. It can have a space or it doesn't need a space. So this, now I put in a margin of 10 pixels, which just adds a bit of space between them. Okay. Well, that's taken a lot of time. I'll just show you very quickly a couple of other things. There's a thing called a horizontal line, which is very obvious what it is. If I put in that, I get a line across the page, which is brilliant for dividing up a page or a label. However, on Moodle, or at least our version of Moodle, very difficult to see. They don't stand out. So I can add a bit of code to it. So I can style the height of it. I don't need the border. And then I can have a box shadow, which is just a shadow around the edge, which adds a whole lot of bulk to it. And box shadows can be used on pictures or tables or any sort of content. And they're just adding a shadow, and you see that on a lot of websites, where it gives it that three-dimensional effect, and it's called a box shadow. So now that looks like that. So instead of a very thin line, which you can hardly see, I get a nice line, which is much easier to see. I use these quite a lot to divide up pages. Let me carry on, 6:44. With an image, there are a number of different things you can do. I don't have a picture available. On a Word document, you can easily put an image into the text, so it becomes part of the text, not below it or above it, or just next to it, like in a newspaper. That's done with a very simple piece of code on Moodle, and it's that float right and make it a size. So width 50%, height auto. That means it will stay there. Float right means just be on the right side of the page and let everything float around it, or float left. Okay, last bit. So there's a little bit of JavaScript. And this, what I'm going to do is have something where I can click a button, or what looks like a button, and make something appear and then disappear. And I need a piece of JavaScript. I didn't write this. I went onto the internet, typed in make text appear and disappear on click of a button, and this is what I found. The internet has some brilliant sites for finding code, especially JavaScript. Now, as I said, to put JavaScript in, you need to do this. Tell the browser this is a piece of JavaScript. Script language equals JavaScript. So I've got the two pointy brackets, the tags, language equals JavaScript, and it ends there with a script slash pointy bracket script slash script. That just tells it here's the beginning, here's the end. And then I have a piece of code. Now, you don't need to understand what that code is. You just need to know that it works. So I really are a beginner at writing code, writing JavaScript. So I've done a few things, but not too much. But I do understand how this works. And I also understand that it does work. Then I need something that I'm going to click. Will I find it? Something that I'm going to click to make something appear and disappear. And in this case, I've got a thing that looks like a button. So it's a div, it's quite small, but it looks like a button. Okay, so that's this bit up here, display inline block. That an inline block tells it, don't fill the whole page, just be big enough to hold my content. Then I've got a bit online toggle visibility. Now that bit makes the JavaScript work. So it's this on click, telling it when you click something with your mouse or use your finger on a phone, something will happen. And in this case, it's toggle visibility. And that's what's written here. So the function is the same. So as long as they're exactly the same, it'll work. Then I've got an ID. Now the IDs, everyone has one. A thing in Moodle or anywhere else can have one ID. And you can only have a single one the same. If there are two the same, they won't work. So that one of them will work and the other one won't work. So here I've got, you can call it anything you like. Here it's called hideaway A. And so I've got hideaway A there telling this toggle visibility hideaway, and I've just added an A just saying anything with hideaway, make it appear and disappear. Then I've got possible answers, and then I'm going to have some content. And if we look, I've got this possible answers, and if I click it, nothing happens. No, it happens when it's saved. So now I've got a button, and then my content appears below it. So it's a very simple button, a div that looks like a button that you can use it so students can click to see answers or all sorts of different things. So it makes it I think a better experience for students. You can present some information, show them the particular piece that you want, and then they click a button to see the next piece. Works very well. Okay, so that's a few simple things on code. Now we've taken about 45 minutes and I've just touched on using some CSS and one thing with JavaScript. Now with any sort of code, there's always going to be lots and lots of different things that you can do. The website that I recommend is this one, www.w3schools.com. Now that has huge amounts of code in it, and it's like set up like lessons. So it gives you demonstrations. You can play with it in their website to see how things work. It's just with the proviso that not everything that is on there will work in Moodle. Most things do, however. So it's that 3 W's, w3schools.com. They're the people who write CSS. Okay, well, that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, there was a question, Peter, that was coming again and again. It was about iframe. If you let me go back and see that. Gareth Jones from Coventry Uni was asking that. So he wants to grab a specific part, not a screenshot, as he wants to use the functionality of the website. For example, he wants to embed Cambridge Dictionary like the search bar, but not the whole page. Is this something doable?
It's possible. It's difficult in Moodle because what you're doing is telling the iframe, I only want a small part of their page. I do have the code for that somewhere. So maybe I can organize with you, Penny, that you send out some pieces of code like that.
Everyone wants that Word document, so you can add
Yeah,
that if you want to. You can send it to me and I can share it with everyone.
Yeah, for sure, I'll do that. And I'll add a couple of other things to it before I give it to you. But and I'll do that with the iframe, though it is quite difficult to do that. Iframes really are not the most responsive things. They pretty much, they want you to take, here's a web page or here's a PDF. They work really well with PDFs. Not pieces of it, because you're somehow having to tell it, don't take the top part and don't take the bottom part, just a piece in the middle, or even with cutting the sides, and it's really difficult, especially as on a different size, it'll work on one monitor, but it won't necessarily work on a different size monitor. Were there any other questions?
Yes, guys, please, anything you would like to ask Peter? Okay, please find your certificate of attendance attached in the chat box. Hi, Peter. Yes, please.
I was just interested. You say that this is the things that you've set up is voluntary. I'm wondering, do you in China, do you also use this as perhaps as a flipped classroom for the main part of the course, or is this as sort of like a minority sport?
For you, Penny?
What did he say? Peter, can you repeat the question? I was trying to attach the certificate of attendance, please.
You mentioned that the websites are voluntary for the students. Do you in China also use this as your main part of teaching, perhaps as a flipped classroom before any session?
I see what you mean. We tend not to teach off Moodle. So the content is there. So teaching, you know, like a flipped classroom is done by some with Zoom, a lot of videos, which may be on Moodle, but it's really, Moodle is used mostly as a repository for content, not as a way of teaching a class.
I see. So, are there many people in your place who don't do this coding, or is it a bit of a minority sport?
Yeah, but definitely minority.
Roni is asking, what is likely to be happening if something I code displays perfectly in Atto, but doesn't show at all on the course page?
It displays where?
I would repeat again. What is likely to be happening if something I code displays perfectly in Atto, A-double-T-O, but doesn't show at all on the course page?
I don't know what A-double-T-O is. Is it a coding? Is it a code place?
Okay, it says it displays within the HTML when I'm writing the content of the label. Yeah, they say ATO is part of Moodle, so maybe it's something ATO editor in Moodle. So maybe this is something we don't have in our version of Moodle here at Nottingham.
Yeah, default text editor. I use a different text editor and take the code from that and then put it into Moodle, and mostly it works. There's only a few things, and it's usually the JavaScript that doesn't work.
Okay.
Oh,
And
yeah, there's an answer. You can't put it in the...
I would like to ask Peter before we go. So do you think, Peter, that coding is going to become an essential skill for teachers in the future?
No, I don't think so. It's the ability to think of, have the imagination to think of, well, this is the thing that I want. And then I think there will be a lot more specialists who then take things and code them. You should know the basics. You should understand how it works. But I don't think everyone needs to know how to code in order to be able to be a successful teacher. But you need to be able to tell somebody else, this is the thing that I want. And I find that quite frustrating sometimes. People have an idea, but they aren't able to express it to me.
Okay. So I will repeat again, the certificate of attendance has been attached several times in the chat box. You just click on it. If you can't really find it and download it, then send me an email. Also, you will find this webinar on our YouTube channel shortly. What else? I really like coding. This is the purpose of this group. This is the purpose of our existence, technology enhanced learning. We believe that teachers would, it's nice to be able to code and think like that. I will attach my email very, very shortly. Okay, I will attach my email. You can send me anything you like, questions. Peter, everyone wants and asks for your...
Yeah, well, I'll send that to you tomorrow morning.
Okay, perfect. So don't worry, guys. We are going to send you that Word document. I'm experimenting as well. Okay, it's an ongoing process. I will attach the certificate of attendance again. Guys, I don't know why you can't see it. It's in the chat box.
Yeah, again.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Please come back next week. We're going to show you how to create an online writing environment. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Roni, send me an email. I remember your name. Okay. I don't know why you can't get it. It's a shame. Okay. Thank you very much.